The night belongs to us. We will bathe in their blood and relish their screams.
Hi everybody, I'm Mark White. I'm the former project lead and managing director for Southampton Vampire by Night. In this video, I'm going to be tackling Code of Conduct. Now, of all the elements that we were working on in the game, this was by far the hardest. And it was something that took us nearly 3 years to produce. A code of conduct, to me, is a physical representation that you're presenting to your player base, which sets the standard of what you expect from your players, from your ref team, from anybody you associate yourself with. It is a literal, in some case, it's a document that's a big deal, because all it takes is for somebody to look through your code of conduct and find that you're missing something that's important, or that you've said something that then raises eyebrows. And it could be, for example, that you're running a LARP, and in the LARP you basically have a ruling that says that sexual encounters between players is fade to black. Okay, so there is no physical intimacy within the game that isn't fade to black. So you've literally gone, right, okay, so basically you're allowed to to kiss and hold hands and hugs and that kind of thing, but if it's something you wouldn't be allowed to do in your workplace, your work environment, it's something that we don't want in the game. So there's an example of a particular code of conduct in that regard. Now, you could also turn around and say, okay, so what we will do is we will allow physical intimacy between players, role play between their characters, but it has to take place within certain areas within the game, be it, a room, for example, is dedicated for players that wish to have that kind of interaction with their characters, etc. And that would then be in the code of conduct, that room would be allocated. And then hopefully you as a team wouldn't call it the smush room or something, it'd be whatever. It could be that you could go another step and say that players have rooms that are their also all areas within the game are time in, meaning when the game goes live, the entire area is live. There's no out of character areas, for example, and so players' rooms where they're sleeping are now live. And you could say that if two characters were to have wish to go and have that kind of interaction, and they have it in a room, then they're allowed to have it in that room, and it could be anywhere, because the actual rights of the player at time in cease, meaning that room belongs to the player during time out, but during time in, that room becomes part of the game world, which means that player has no rights over that area. There could be that, for example. So you could find that you go back to your room and there's some people utilising it for some role play, and you've got no choice but to vacate your room because that role play is taking place within there. So these are different ways of showing in a code of conduct what is acceptable and what is not, and how each of those can be perceived both negatively and positively, meaning those rules will suit some players, but they won't suit others. And so that's why, to me, the Code of Conduct was one of the scariest documents to try to create, because at the time, public opinion, social trends, etc., was all over the show. We've gone for a really big transition in the last 10 years of with social media, of what is and isn't acceptable, what you must and must not do, what you can and cannot say, etc., etc. It's all going all over the show. And if you're creating a system and you're putting a code of conduct out, you're literally like stamping you're going, that's what we think, and bam. And if what you think goes against what a large group of other people think, all of a sudden, via that code of conduct, your company could be brought under horrendous scrutiny and made to look, very negative in the public eye. So it's a scary thing. And there is no template. So utilising another LARP's code of conduct is something I would not recommend you do, because you can use it for inspiration. You can use it to see if there's elements of it that are great, that you go, oh yeah, I totally agree, and things you don't agree with. Definitely utilise another LARP's, established LARP's, successful LARP's code of conduct for inspiration, but also ensure that you put into that code of conduct what you believe is correct. And don't be afraid to make the changes. Well, that's the lie. Be afraid to make changes, but in the right way. You're afraid because, you want to ensure that your company is as open-minded and as accepting as possible, for example. So one of the things that we were trying to do with Southampton Vampire by Night was make it as inclusive as possible. And we were on purposely making certain elements of our game taboo, meaning not in the game, to allow that to take place. So we were trying to avoid discrimination in our game. We were trying to avoid religious kind of friction. We were looking to avoid certain topics that can cause great upset. For example, one of the things, due to personal reasons, we were looking at was it was taboo. It was meaning it wouldn't take place in our game. Was children, and basically you see in computer games sometimes that children have plot shields, which means they can't be hurt. You can't do anything negative towards them, kind of thing. We were looking at that in our game. So if children did appear in our game, even when we were running plot lines where I've discussed that, the children could die at the end and all of that kind of stuff, we were looking at age brackets for them, and we were also looking at basically an element in the game that what the players were finding out wasn't the truth, kind of thing, and the players would find that out quite quickly. It was one of those things where it came about because during the production of this, me and my wife, we had a miscarriage, and the effect that had on me and her was, it was insane at the time. And so that was why it's one of those things, like, now as a parent, I understand it. It's different. When I watch movies now, and little thing like the other day, we were watching a TV series and there was a mass grave with skeletons in it. And then they showed a little bit of material, and then the next scene went to a lady holding a baby that was wrapped in that material. So that the baby is in that pit with all those other bodies. And that really kind of choked us and upset us. And that never would have choked us up before. But now we're parents, you get that kind of different feeling towards things. So I feel like as the development of the game was going on and we were learning more and more, we were taking more aspects from members of the team and putting them into the code of conduct than I ever thought we would. because we were trying to make the game. It's vampire, so it's going to be a dark game. There was going to be stuff in it, but we were trying to do it in the right way, and and the other thing was that we were trying to implement alongside the code of conduct was, and I'll come back to talking more about it in a minute, but was two other elements we had in place. One was a form that players would fill in before they attended their first game, and the other one was when you get that moment where you had it all in your head and then it just goes out the other side? One of those. So 2 things in place. Come on, Mark. What were they? One was talking about what you would do. Grievance system. See, it comes back in again. That is the right-hand side of your brain looking for memories and recalling it and then sending it over to the left-hand side of your brain, which controls your map. Sorry. So grievance system and the that document, I've forgotten the name of the document, but the document players would fill in before they started, all linked with the code of conduct. So I've attended LARPs in the past where things have happened which are, not good things, and the ref team and event organisers haven't been prepared to handle that situation. When do you call the police? When do you intervene? Who do you ban a player outright? Do they get a strike? The list goes on. So bad things, unfortunately, can happen at LARPs. And what we were looking to do was to have 3 levels of protection, not only for us, but also for the players. So the first level of protection was we basically put in a checklist. Let me say checklist. It went through all of the what we believe to be categories of phobias, fears, things that could upset people, etc., etc. And then what we had asked the players to do was to basically colour them in green, amber or red. Meaning green, they're perfectly okay with it. Amber, that it would have an emotional effect on them, but it wouldn't devastate them in any way. They're okay with it, they're just maybe slightly uncomfortable with it. It would definitely. And then red was, no, that would definitely upset me. That's 100% something that I wouldn't want to be a part of. So we would sit down with every new player and go through that document. That information would be kept secure, and only a select member of the ref team would basically be able to see it. And also there would be one neutral party that has no investment at all in the game, that's a trusted individual, that would also have access to it. And I'll come back to why. So basically, with that information, that would then tie in to the code of conduct, so they would know what of the things that they've just discussed are in our code of conduct. They're all listed, what our views and opinions are, how they would appear within our game. That was all in there. And then also the things that, as an organiser, that we definitely wouldn't have in the game. So that was made clear as well. And that would have been on that document as they went down. There would have been an area where it was literally just highlighted to say, this is not in our game, this is not acceptable. So when they were filling that form and they came to that, it would be clearly visible to them, okay, so, right, you don't do that. And then on the other side of it, we had a grievance system. And the grievance system was there. So if a player at any point felt like that they were personally in any way attacked, I'm not going to go with offended here. I'm going to go with, they got really upset by something that's taken place. Or that they've broken one of our rules or something like that. Because part of the code of conduct as well would also be, of course, rules like don't steal, don't do drugs, don't do this, don't do this. And then the consequences of breaking those rules would be on there. The grievance system was more implied with breaches of the kind of that first document, that stuff. and also to do with breaches of rules to do with, for example, I'm not going to say physical contact. That's a separate thing. But basically, player becomes upset in some way. Not, God damn it, Mark. Not upset, but because we all get upset. When I say upset, I'm not talking about, he just called me fat. I mean, granted, if somebody did call me fat, I didn't know, okay, I'd get upset. I would get upset. But, all right, the grievance system was there for players who came upset or were offended in some way, whatever it was. They could utilise the grievance system. What the grievance system was about, they had 24 hours after the event had taken place to basically to either write up or to type or to voice record or something like that to give their account of the situation in some form of media that could be retained. So not like a face-to-face conversation with a ref that wasn't recorded or something. It would have to be something that could be recorded, They would have 24 hours to produce that. What would then happen is that the other people that were involved in that situation would then be contacted, and they would be asked for their accounts of the situation, and they would be given 24 hours to produce their side of it. Finally, this information would then go via the ref team, and then a decision would be made based off of listening to or reading through all the accounts, etc. Now, the neutral party would be made involved during this process. And also, more importantly, if this process was being used against a member of the ref team or the crew, then that is incredibly important that we have that neutral party involved that has no attachments, etc., etc. So that way you would get a unbiased opinion of, a resolution of what's going on. Now, some things would have just been set in stone. Some things would have been really simple. It's like, if you are caught doing drugs at the game, you are instantly banned and you cannot come back, and we would contact the police. Simple. What the police choose to do is up to them, but as event organisers, we had a no drug policy. And it's the same with assault. It would be the same with any form of rape or anything like this. We literally had it was going to be in black and white. It's like the police will be called. The police will handle the situation. As a game organisers, this is what we will do. So it was clear, because you never want to be in a situation as a game organiser when an event takes place, and because you haven't stated what actions you will take during that situation, it then allows the community to then pull apart and say, well, you didn't do this, you didn't separate the individuals, you allowed that person to go back into your game world, you didn't call the police for 24 hours, you didn't call an ambulance, you didn't do this. You get what I mean? You open yourself up for scrutiny, whilst if it's clearly defined, this is what we do as an organisation if this event were to take place, and you categorise those events as best you can. For example, assault. If one of your players if two individuals at your game come into physical blows, this is what you do. And then that could be, you just turn around and say, right, what we do is we call the police. And as game organisers, we will try our best to keep others out of the situation, but we will not involve ourselves with those two people. Could be that. It could be because that way you're trying to protect your crew from getting into the middle of a fight, and it could. But your priority is to protect your player base and get the police to come and do their job and break this up. It could be that you have on-site security, so you have, in theory, bouncers, that it's their responsibility to then break up that fight. And that's what you as an organisation will do. You have on-site security that will be utilised in the event of XYZ. And that's what it all comes down to. So a lot of you are probably watching this video going, I didn't agree with that, or I'd have changed what you said there and stuff like that. And that's exactly it. Code of conduct is a minefield. And, we even looked at things like decompression space, meaning at our games, we were going to allocate always a safe area that players could go to decompress. So it was completely out of game, and it was an area where they could go and they could just breathe and let that emotional situation they were just in just go off of them, and it was always dedicated as that was a safe area, and players were informed that, this isn't an area you go to have a chat and a beer and talk about football. It's an area where players will go to just have somewhere they can pull themselves away from the game, somewhere quiet. And we would have ensured there was a member of the ref team that would visit that area throughout the game to ensure that players were okay. That's something that was going to be in our code of conduct, for example. Other games may not have that. Other games may not. That implementing that may be incredibly difficult. But yeah, it's surprising how many players never read a code of conduct for a LARP. Like, just don't. Until something happens, and then all of a sudden that code of conduct is under massive scrutiny. My advice to you, if you're creating a project, or if you're, first of all, if you're attending a LARP, read that LARP's code of conduct. Just read it. You may think, it's not relevant to me, I'm a good boy or good girl or good person. But, there may be things in there that are banned from that LARP that you're unaware of. And if they don't mention it during the game brief, if they have a game brief, and then you're to do it, you could find yourself in a situation where you've just broken a rule that you were completely unaware of. And a lot of LARPs will say to you, please read and understand the code of conduct before attending. Part of the ticket or something like that. I agree that I've read the code of conduct. If you tick that box and you haven't read it, it's up to you. But I would advise reading it. And as an event organizer, stroke someone who's creating a project and stuff like that, code of conduct is something you should definitely have to think about. And it's something that you have to stand by. You're literally putting yourself out there on what you believe is the right thing to the world. So make sure it's something that you agree with, and that it's yours. So don't ever feel pressured to change something or do something in your code of conduct that you don't agree with. Because, like I say, there is a lot of opinions out there, and because you've said it one way means that although you've made some people happy, you've upset a load of others. So you're never going to make everybody happy. You just got to remember that. So the only person that you need to make sure is happy is you. Whoever is the owner, whoever is the person responsible, that project lead, that managing director, whoever it is, you have to be 100% happy with your code of conduct. Don't worry about what everybody else thinks, because at the end of the day, it's what you believe. And hopefully you've made a code of conduct which is, like 80% of the people that read it agree with and go, that's cool. Hopefully you've made something like that. If you find yourself, you've got every single person who reads your code of conduct gets really upset due to a certain point, you should maybe revisit that and just think, was it worded correctly, or did you get it across what you meant, or that maybe it's something that you as an individual may need to change based off of the large public opinion. But if you've just got one or two people or whatever saying, no, that's wrong, don't. Keep to your guns. But yeah, open-minded, of course, it's definitely be open-minded. Take what everybody's saying on board, but when it comes to that actual final decision, That's your decision, nobody else's. So yeah, that's code of conduct. And Minefield, like, definitely, like I said at the start, one of the hardest things I was working on throughout. In the end, a member of the team took the control of the code of conduct and created a really good document. It didn't cover everything, and we still had more work to do on it, but it was definitely nice to get those thoughts down on paper and for somebody to look over. And yeah, it's one of those things. It was one of the scariest things I was looking at on the project, was that. And something that you'll find a lot of Level Up organisers or individuals that are creating their games or whatever will be interested to know what is in or is your code of conduct. Yeah, I was surprised by that. It was one of the most asked questions then I later found out were other individuals creating games or were involved in the creation of other LARPs were after the code of conduct. I don't know why. I mean, yeah. But there you go. So hopefully, keep on doing this at the end of the videos. Hopefully you have found this information here useful. I haven't turned around and said of anything that I'd have made different about this, because there isn't really. The code of conduct was worked on so heavily and it still needed more work before it went live. But yeah, I know if I ever did this again, I'd have exactly the same thing with the code of conduct. It would be a real big priority in the creation of my LARP, my project. If I ever started a company up and all of that lot, whatever, just, yeah. So anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed it. And you found the video useful. I love you all. I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.